Hi everyone, very excited to have Kwasi here from our product team to discuss all of the exciting innovation that's happening in the MCP space and share that knowledge with everyone. The goal of these sessions is really to take the expertise that we have with our team and help educate the wider developer community on what we're seeing happening within the AI space. And there's always something that's happening and keeping us on our toes.
For sure.
that we're excited to dive into. So today I wanted to dive a little bit into MCP, and maybe before we started with that, if you want to do a quick intro on yourself and what you do at SambaNova.
Awesome. So great to be here, Vasanth. So I'm Quasean Komar. I'm an architect at SambaNova. I work on our starter kits and some of our reference architecture and advanced demos. I have a background in machine learning and statistics, and I've been at SambaNova for coming on 3 years.
Yeah.
So me and my team, we focus on building kind of production grade demos and utilizing tools like MCP to make them work as best as possible, basically.
Yeah, and we're excited to have him officially here in the Bay Area.
I am officially
What is
here.
this? 2 or 3 months now?
This is 2 or 3 months in the Bay Area, exactly. Yeah. So I'm acclimatizing.
Yeah.
You can tell because I've got a T-shirt on. So that's the first giveaway that I'm not in London anymore.
Yeah, it's such a big shift having you come from London all the way here.
Exactly.
Love it. So why don't we dive into it? So what is MCP?
What is MCP? So MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. It came out of Anthropic, and Anthropic is obviously a leading AI lab. It's a basic standard for AI applications to universally talk to each other. And the standard kind of came in, I'm trying to think, maybe early sort of last year-ish, or when we started to hear about it, and obviously has gained significant traction. The way I like to think about it, Vasanth, is almost like a USB-C connector for AI apps. The way the USB-C connects every charging station and it's standardized, it's made things a hell of a lot easier for electronics in general. That's what MCP is aiming to do for AI apps. So you can have an agent that talks to an MCP server. You can have an MCP host, such as Claude, which was the big kind of use case that started it off, and they can connect to all sorts of things. We can go into detail, but yeah, in a nutshell, it's a protocol that's being used to kind of manage AI services and tools.
Love it. I think that the tools is definitely kind of the key point that I see a lot of developers easily integrate that into. Maybe let's start with kind of some of the common use cases that you're starting to see emerge from MCP.
Yeah, so I think the MCP kind of, if we kind of break it down, you had the servers. So if I kind of give you a technical breakdown, you have the servers. They're the ones hosting the functionality. So you could have, say, a GitHub server, right? And then you have the hosts themselves. Also, the clients are the ones who are receiving this information and are able to consume it. And then you have the hosts like Claude and things that are able to facilitate this interaction between two. So just by the nature of the medium, code development became an instant use case, right? Because some of the first hosts were the likes of Cursor, Windsurf, and Claude. Right. So by their nature, what are they doing? IDEs. So suddenly, and this was a great use case, if you were working on Cursor like you were before, suddenly you can get an MCP server that has the docs for this really niche product that you're working on. And then suddenly your whole workflow has not only got the web search information, it's almost got this new set of tools that this MCP server has brought in. So that has been, I think for me, the killer use case. And that's the one that's probably driven its adoption. It's just the way we see it now. Yeah.
And I think that's an incredibly important point. So one of the common use cases that we end up seeing is tool integration. But MCP actually goes much beyond that, actually.
For sure.
It was interesting. I was on a call earlier, and we were diving into the deep learning course that Anthropic just released when it comes to MCP. And one of the two things that they highlight beyond just tools is that you're able to bring in resources. I think documentation is a great example of that. And you're able to bring in prompts as well, because I think there's still this big movement that's happening when it comes to prompt engineering and getting the templates that you need to actually get the performance out of these models. That's very necessary.
Yeah.
So I think those are the lesser known areas of MCP that I think are also worth talking about as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think being able to bring in resources in a uniform way is a big deal. So if you want to bring, if SambaNova want to bring in our, some of our hardware information, we can bring that in as a resource.
Yeah.
And that makes it super easy. But what's even, I think, more useful is just that when you see companies like GitHub and Gmail and all these people making very useful resources that now you can consume en masse.
Yeah.
And I think the key about MCP and all of these standards is like reproducibility. And I think, if you talk to anyone that's building AI agents at the moment, the key problem that they found is that I've got to use 8 frameworks, I've defined the tool so many times.
Yeah.
And I think one point I really want to draw home is that this is kind of like that old acronym that they use in data, which is write once, read many, worm.
Yep.
And that's what MCP is. Like, you write the thing once and you define it, that's it.
That's it.
Many clients then read it, consume it, and that whole architecture makes it super useful.
Yeah. It's so useful. I mean, like, whether you're using that within agents, whether you're using that within desktop clients, whether you're using that in just basic applications, it's incredibly powerful to be able to use and consume in so many different ways.
Yes, definitely. And I think that's why we're seeing the code development is kind of a nailed on use case, but you're beginning to see so many more. So we've been doing a lot of work in like sandboxes at the moment, right? Mm-hmm. So you've got kind of code generation now that you can pass out to a sandbox application and tell it to give you an answer in a very uniform way that abstracts it away from maybe the underlying technology. So as we look for more general purpose agents, and I think this is something that we are seeing a shift towards, right? If we look at the niche models, they're so good, but we can have these agentic systems that can kind of call all of them. And being able to have a uniform set of tools that you can go to and pick for your task is really great. So if you think about the agent comes in and it says, what tools do I have available to me today? That whole interface is super easy as well. And what we're seeing in terms of SambaNova's journey is, how do you make it easy for, I think it's going to become a requirement for AI builders to have MCP integrated into what you're doing, right? Because the user themselves doesn't want to get into custom code.
Right.
They just want to be able to take it. It's a very kind of uniform JSON format that will go and get a file or executable and just do it for you. So I think now we're seeing that standard. It then takes almost all the app builder needs to think about is not what tools do I need, but how do I enable MCP to run on my application. And that's a really different design pattern that I think is really enabling things to move much faster, because now you can have general purpose agents that not necessarily had to define their tools up front, but could kind of say, you give it the tools that you want, and then it will figure out what to do with them.
100%. And I think that's like one of the big reasons why the ecosystem is adopting it. I think
100%.
the uptick really started to happen is it started as Anthropic's protocol.
100%.
It took a couple of months. We saw a lot of adoption on it, and then you had OpenAI come in. And then everyone was like, wait a second, this actually might be a standard. And now, at least on the time that we're recording this right after Microsoft Build, they just announced the Windows integration of MCP into the desktop, into agents as well, into Foundry and Azure. Now you're starting to see all of these big players actually adopt this thing, and that's driving a lot of momentum to actually force people to actually keep this as a standard. And I feel like that's what this industry really needs right now, is more standardization of these tools.
And I think that's why you're seeing the big labs adopt it, because actually it solves a huge pain point for them, because no one writes more AI code than they do, and their standard is kind of music to their ears. It allows their products to be more usable, and the same with us, right? It allows our models to be more usable if they can just go and plug into the standard. And I think what we're seeing from this almost like ubiquitous integration is that it just shows you just how much universality it has, because again, if you look at these definitions of these tools, they are JSON files.
Yeah.
You know, these are very simple things, and you can abstract.
Yeah.
You can abstract away what you need to do, right? So you can have, you know, discover what tools you've got, and very uniform methods that can use that. But I think, you know, one thing that I think where MCP took a little bit longer was when a standard comes out, many people ask, okay, this is great for, you know, the developer, but what about the enterprise? How can I, the enterprise CIO or CTO, adopt this technology? And having these big labs come in kind of got to one of the elephants in the room about MC, which was security, right? Because it is just code from the internet, right? The way it's, who authored that code, it could be something that's, you know, like almost like an app from the App Store, right? You have all that safety there for a reason. You just don't download packages. And now with the likes of OpenAI and Microsoft coming in, you're seeing that they will put some of these things behind the wall of security. And I think that will, to your point, drive even more usage, because once the enterprise are like, oh, okay, this is okay to use, you will see even more. And I think, honestly, from a SambaNova point of view, this is really great, and we're seeing great open source stuff come out of it as well.
Let's talk about open source, because I think that's a very key component, and I think there's always this debate that goes back and forth, like, do I only use closed source? Should I start switching to open source?
100%.
Will the open source models actually work well in these use cases? What have you been seeing as far as the models that are running on SambaNova and how they perform in these MCP use cases?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question, Vasanth. I think what we started to see, I personally, us here at SambaNova, we're huge proponents of open source because we think it will win. And what we're seeing with these latest crop of models, right, you know, the Mavericks of the world, the Qwens of the world, is that they are a step forward in the way that they can follow instructions and also work with structured output and tool calling. Now, that means that now that they can consume these tools, what we're actually starting to see is very complex agentic applications being put together. So I think, you know, before it was only a certain amount of closed source models, but now we're seeing really good performance from, you know, if you look at Maverick on SambaNova Cloud and you go and have a look at it, it works really, really well with context length, all that tool usage. So we're starting to see really good performance. And I would also say, you know, some models to call out, you know, V3, very, very performant model. You know, very good at planning, following instructions, and also calling these MCP tools as and when it needs them. So
100%. I think there's a great quote that came out from artificial analysis that at this point in time, for non-reasoning use cases, the open source models are actually leading compared to the closed source models. Especially like if you compare like V3 as you just mentioned, that's one of the gold standards that's right now in terms of cost effectiveness, in terms of speed when you run it on these platforms like SambaNova, and in terms of accuracy that you're getting out of the model. It's on all of those three vectors, you're seeing great utilization, and speed really does matter also in a lot of these, right? So you want to dive into that too?
Yeah, I mean, what MCP is showing us is that if you give builders more tools, they will use those tools. If you then get more tools, you get more LLM calls and you can do more stuff. If you put that chain of events together, it means that the speed of your inference gets even more important, because you go from making 3 LLM calls, because maybe you had some tool that was in some Python file that was custom, to basically a whole MCP server that could have 50 tools. Now, because you have better performing open source models, they're allowed to use. So I think that is a big, you know, component as to why we're seeing this uptick. And the speed, you know, at SambaNova, like if you go and run, you know, DeepSeek, and we've got these world records, it really does matter, right? When we chain together on our apps like 20, 30 calls, and then add in the tool use as well, it really starts to add up. And I think lots of people are seeing that now. You know, we see demos, you think, oh, it might be a little bit sluggish, but once you do are able to increase the performance of the inference
Yeah.
and the tool calling as well, right? Because it's all being packaged up now to talk to these external databases as well. So I think that for sure is a big one. And I think what's impressed me most with open source at the moment is that we're kind of having that aha moment in that, you know, it's kind of people are going, oh wow, these things can actually work pretty well autonomously, right? So I mean, you know, we were talking before we came here looking at some demos that we're putting together ourselves, and you're really starting to see, you know, just go ahead and do a task. It will figure it out, go and get the right tools. And that is a really cool world to see what people are going to be able to achieve within the next, not even a year. It used to be like 6 to 9 months, and now it's like 2 to 3 months, right? Like it keeps coming closer. And I think that's exciting for us, our clients, people we want to build with SambaNova.
The speed of innovation in this industry is beyond it.
Every day there's something new.
But at the same time, I think that there are a lot of people who are still getting started in their journey, and let's shift from theoretical to practical. So how would someone get started right now?
100%. So to get started on MCP, there's a number of things you can do. Firstly, we have some lovely documentation coming up on MCP and our integrations page that will show you basically how to very quickly set up an MCP server, link it to a SambaNova model, and get basically building tools for yourself. So you get a feel about the standard and how it works. And I think that's always the best, from first principles, understand a little bit about the technology that you're using so that you can apply it. And we've got these guides available to you. And then just gradually have a look at putting them into your apps. What I say to people is, say, let's take a classic example, right? You had an agent and it had 2 tools. It was doing web search and maybe it was doing Wi-Fi.
Sure.
Now, you can look at the SambaNova Getting Started page and we'll tell you how to take these tools and turn them into MCP tools. And then from there you can actually have the same workflow, but now you're using an MCP workflow which can be shared among your models, and you're kind of using the SambaNova LLMs as well. So I think that's a really cool way for people to get started. Again, there's some great courses on there. The deep learning one that's just come out, I would recommend people check that out. That's going to be a great course to kind of get yourself more familiar with the theoretical side of things as well. But
Love it. Yeah. And of course, if you're just trying out any of these models, you can also head over to cloud.sambanova.ai. You get access to all of these things. It's free to get started, and you get access to some very fast models, some of the best performing models, and the ones that we would recommend for using MCP. I think DeepSeek, like you mentioned, Maverick is a really great resource as well, and these are some of the bleeding edge stuff that people can get started with pretty fast and pretty easily.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, we shouldn't, I always say we shouldn't forget the smaller models here as well. I think 8B is cracking, Qwen 3 as well, all of these. And that's what I love about, open source is that I've seen so many things that, you can, just putting the right set of models together for your task. And it's never been easier with standards like MCP to get them running. You can get really good performance. So if you are paying X to a closed source provider, if you just swap that in, it's cheaper, and you're starting to, now we're having this kind of unification around these standards. You're starting to see real great real world results.
No, it's fantastic. Awesome. Anything else you want to mention on the topic before we wrap up?
So I think one thing that I would say, this is a lot about MCP. I think a lot of people ask me about, okay, that's for MCP, and like, what about agents? Right?
Sure.
And I think I would like to touch on some of the standards that we're seeing and some of the, I would say, the almost like the complementary standards. So there's a big debate in the industry about agents to agents, right? Which is Google standard, in case anyone hasn't had a look at yet. But a standard that's come out, which is primarily built at unifying the way agents talk to each other. And MCP is unifying the way that those tools and resources, like Vasanth said, talk to each other. But what I'm starting to see is that you are starting to see people build with A2A, some of the big frameworks. So I would say to people, the people who want to get ahead of the curve, to look at that, because they are complementary. They're not actually opposing each other. And I think Google and Anthropic have said this. So if you think about you're defining the agent in many places, but you're defining the tools once, the next question is, well, why would I define the agent in many places? And I think A2A looks to have a look at that, and we're actually doing some A2A stuff on SambaNova, so watch out for that because I think that's going to be really cool as well.
I love the teasing to future conversation.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, appreciate the time, Kwasi. This is amazing, and to the audience, look for a lot more of these conversations. We're excited to share more about all of the amazing stuff that's happening in the industry, all of the amazing stuff that teams like Kwasi's is building, and we're excited to help you continue building and working with many of the amazing models that we have in the open source community on SambaNova Cloud.